Hello, everybody, and welcome to Metaphysical Insights. This is William Becker, and I'm your host. Um, Today's a little bit different. Excuse me as I adjust things. Um, the guest I had lined up had something happen. He couldn't make it, unfortunately. He was going to be telling a lot of holiday stories and things like that. It's what he does for a living. He's an incredible person and very talented. He's been on the show before, and he will be again. Um, so I thought I'd take today to have a little. It'll be a shorter show, and just kind of mention a little bit some of the very many holidays that take place in December. Um, People forget, especially in this country, that there are many different holidays that take place, and um, we are fortunate enough here to have so many different cultures and traditions and people from all over the world that it creates a very rich cultural background and atmosphere if you allow it to. And um, I think it's important to at least know the other holidays exist. But before I go through that, um, I want to talk briefly about just what it's like sometimes getting through this time of year, especially in this country. I am not making the show political. I keep politics out of what I do professionally. Um, People that know me or anybody else can ask me my politics and what I think about things, and I'm happy to talk to them. But that's not what this is for. But there are some things that are important just to remember anyway. It doesn't really matter which of the holidays you're celebrating. The chances are very good that you'll be around some people on a very different um, place on the political spectrum and the cultural philosophy spectrum, and I mean, so many things than you are. And it's important, I think, that whenever possible, we keep the peace in the public gatherings and family situations and things like that. I know I'm going to have at least one occasion where there will be at least one or two family members that think very differently than I do, and they have that right. Um, and so we will not talk about politics or religion. Um, and so um, it's good to see people are here. But everybody is different, every situation is different. But if you are in a situation where things come up, a few things that I've been reminded of lately, and I'm talking to myself as much as to just in general everybody else. It's important that we listen to people. Why should they listen to us if we don't listen to them? Um, it's people want to be know they've been heard and understood, even if not they're not agreed with. But if you can give the human being the respect of listening with an open ear, an open mind, not that you need to look at changing your position, but actually hear what they're going to say instead of planning how you're going to reply. Listen and then state your position or whatever um, in a way that is, it can be firm, but it, don't do it in an antagonistic way at these kinds of events. Or even in person, it's not the, start out by just the listening point. Um, and then, if things in a private nature get to a point where you have to be more forceful, or if you um, are in a protest or in a political rally or something, it's a different situation and a different story sometimes because you have the opinions coming forth is a major part of what you're doing. But with all the social, at least start out nice. I watched a video the other day, and um, I can't remember the woman's name, but for some reason I get some pretty interesting things on Instagram. And this person was talking about something I struggle with often and have for many, many years. It's about tolerance and intolerance. And um, when do you, when are you tolerant of intolerance and when are you not? And it's a question that doesn't have a pat answer. Even some of the experts or philosophers who believe we should always be tolerant, even of intolerance, have said there are times when that's not true. And intolerance of hate and misogyny and bigotry of all kinds, so many other things, sometimes need to be faced, or sometimes we need to be intolerant of them, um, and not allow them to happen. Because if you if you allow things to go unchecked, then you wind up with that's the hate taking over the entire um, society or the entire country. We have lots and lots of examples of that throughout history, and including modern history. So, again, this isn't a political speech about one side or the other. It's just um, finding the balance is difficult, and it's important that we recognize that. It's important that we act, that we don't beat ourselves up when we don't necessarily live up to the standards that we'd like to do, but use it as a learning experience. And remember, there just isn't a one size fits all. I I don't believe in the whole it's this or that, or um, everything is on a continuum and that changes. Technicolor and shades of gray is my idea. So, just a little something along those lines to think about as we're kind of put into closer quarters and such. And a lot of people are really emotionally disturbed right now, and it's important for people to recognize that and realize that about themselves and about others, and show a little compassion to the human, if not even when we need to push back on the ideas as much as we possibly can. And remember, violence doesn't solve anything, it makes it worse. Look at all the revolutions in history, in modern history, and you usually wind up with a new leader that is as bad or worse than what was overthrown. The student rebellion in Iran wasn't a religious rebellion, but the Ayatollahs, the hard wing, right wing religious sector, took over the revolution. The students, the beginning of the revolution was simply to kick out a corrupt Shah and reestablish a democracy. And then look what they got. Um, that's just one of many, many examples. And so, remember that when um, the blood really boils, and sometimes it's easy to think of um, breaking out and destroying instead of changing. It's not productive. Um, and let's see, with that, if people want to comment and tell me what they think about the ideas later, I'm happy for dialogue. I'm not willing to put up with rants and um, and I'm not willing to put up with clickbait, fake facts, or twisted facts, or things like that. I do my research. I work well at it. I've got a bachelor's in history, a master's degree that also requires a lot of critical thinking and research. And I don't have much tolerance anymore for uh, things that feed into the anger or the emotion, but have little to no bearing on truth and reality. Um, and with that, let's go to some of the different holidays out there. And for those of you that are still listening after that rambling rant, or hopefully not a rant, that rambling piece, thank you for staying. And great. I did a little bit of a research. Now, this isn't going to be a big summary of everything. For one thing, some of what I have known about these is rusty because it's been a while, because I've studied religions and that part of history and different things. So, you know, the brain, especially when you have as much white hair as I do, gets a little fuzzy. But I've got some website notes and stuff like that too that I'm just looking at. St. Nicholas Day is the first one that I came up with on my search. I'm only looking at December, and that's December 5th or 6th, depending on a few different things. And St. Nicholas was the patron saint of Greece and, or is the patron saint of Greece and in Russia, so Orthodox churches. And St. Nicholas was a very generous bishop, I think 5th or 6th centuries. There are lots of different stories about him, bringing gold into the poor shoemaker's family, bringing food, I mean, giving to the needy. And he became a saint then of this selfless giving, a kind man and older. And that eventually moved north and west and into the rest of the Christian area. And in the Netherlands, it took more of the uh, Kinderklaas, I think it was, up in the Netherlands, and who also had a sidekick who was supposed to have been a Moor. And they had, Sinterklaas gave out the nice, rewarded the good kids, and the other one did the punishment to the bad kids and the lump of coal or whatever type of thing. And then the Dutch, when they came over to New Amsterdam, now called New York, um, they brought the tradition with them. And so that started in the communities here, even though Christmas wasn't celebrated here. And again, this isn't on Christmas, this is well before. But that Kinderklaas is the model of how our Santa Claus developed. He was the inspiration, and he was based on the bishop, St. Nicholas. So if everybody's totally confused now, we'll go ahead and go on. Now, most of the Catholic feast day celebrations and such like this, they always have a mass, and they also usually you'll either have feasting or fasting associated with them. And St. Nicholas Day, I'm quite sure, is a feast day, not a fast day. And the Protestants were into the saints, so with the Protestant Reformation, the popularity of St. Nicholas changed to just the Orthodox and Catholic faiths, and he became more secularized as the Santa over the centuries then. The next one we have is Immaculate Conception, which is on the 8th of December. Now, Immaculate Conception is to honor the, the Virgin Mary, who is said to have been born without original sin. Now, for those who aren't familiar, original sin is the idea that the fall in and Eve's, the fall of Adam and Eve. There we go. I'll learn how to talk one day, people. I really will. Um, tainted all future mankind with original sin. Now, the idea that Christ, who is supposed to be God as well as man, um, could have been born of a woman who had even had the briefest touch of corruption or sin, as it's put, um, doesn't make sense to the church. So she had to have been born basically without sex. Um, I'm not quite sure. It's been a while since I've read the theology, and um, I'm not quite sure just how they explain that. I mean, with the birth of Jesus, it was the Holy Spirit that impregnated Mary. But this, Mary's mother, just by magic, I guess. And I'm not trying to denigrate or downplay everything. I just didn't refresh my memory on how that is conceived to happen. But it is a very major feast day in much of the church, and it's uh, in the more Catholic or in the more conservative areas of the church. I think it's a pretty solemn one. And remember, all of these religions that we talk about, they all have a degree and variation on how much people believe what, how conservative or how liberal they are in general, in all kinds of ways. It's actually not the right terminology, but I think it gives the point across. Um, so please don't ever lump everybody in from one faith or tradition together, especially if you have one bad actor doing something. Um, all of them have basically a ultra right wing terrorist version, and all of them have a pretty left wing liberal version, and most people are in between. And so don't don't judge everybody by the actions of a few. Um, and then the next one is a Buddhist holiday, and Bodhi Day. I haven't heard it pronounced. And this is the day. It's December 8th, and it's the day that Buddha was supposed to have reached enlightenment. He sat down under the Bodhi tree, and after years of teachers and wandering, Siddhartha Buddha had it was the Buddha's name, was a prince in India, and he was raised in the palace and never allowed to see any of the struggles of reality most people go through. He only was exposed to beauty and happy and um, the good things. And so was very naive about everything. But one day he actually went out somehow. He was an adult by this point, and um, he was shocked by all the misery he saw. And so he was on a quest then to figure out this cause and source of the misery. And he went through all kinds of different um, pathways to get there. And he decided, no, I'm not leaving this from this spot. I'm going to meditate here until I know the answer. And it said the headdress that you see on him, one of the traditions is actually those were big snails that went up there because with their shells and such, they help keep his head cool. Because India's hot, even if you're in the shade of a tree. And so nature was helping him. And he reached a state and he said basically, and again, this is badly paraphrasing the whole concept, but it's that misery is hanging on to what there is and not realizing everything is temporary and you let it go. And that means the horrible experiences, the positive experiences, you let them go. You don't stay stuck in them. And again, that's badly paraphrased. And for all my Buddhist friends out there, please forgive me. Um, and we can talk some more about that too. It's a beautiful religion. All of these religions have a great deal of beauty in them. And yeah, they all do. Most of them aren't by their nature harmful or destructive. It's how they're used, and human beings use them for their own purposes a lot of times, and often that's for control, power, and wealth. Okay, feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe, December 12th. And the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe, it's based on children who in Guadalupe, I believe in Mexico, were visited by the Virgin Mary. And they told they were out and they saw the vision of her. There is a church there now, and oh, I can't remember if it was this vision or a different one. But anyway, I believe she gave them roses in one of the visits with them to prove that she had been there. And it's a very important um, a feast day, particularly for the Latin American Catholic community, because this is a miracle that happened in on the western or in the western continents, in the Americas and in the Latin American part of it. North America, because it was Mexico, but it's still that part um, of the population. Remember that Mexico and Spain owned a good chunk of the West up to the Oregon border and a lot of the desert Southwest Texas. I mean, um, the South Americans and Mexicans were here first. um, and that is also a day with, um, well, it also celebrates or symbolizes patriotism and devotion because it's a she's a patron saint of Mexico. But let's see, her millions of pilgrims typically visit her her um, her basilica, her church, in December. So it's a very busy month there. Um, and and I'm sorry, this wasn't um, to children. This was to a Mexican man in 1531. And the let me see. Sorry, my computer is doing weird things. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Very clumsy, but um, okay. Hanukkah from December 18 to 26 is the next one on the list. And this is a Jewish holiday, begins on the 18th. And a central part of the holiday is lighting the candles in the menorah. It's 9 branched. Um, the ninth one, the one in the center, is used to light the others. And the ritual symbolizes how oil for one night, one day, lasted for 8 days during a battle between a small group of Jewish people and the Greek Syrian army in 165 BC. And the Jewish forces emerged victorious and reclaimed the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, is the theory. Customary foods are latkes, which are delicious. Um, Suffengoit, I can't pronounce that very well, which is a jam-filled donut, and briskets. This is where the dreidel comes in, and um, Hanukkah Guild things for the kids, presents for the kids during the 8 days of Hanukkah, and it's a very widely practiced tradition in this country. I have several friends who practice it. Um, and then we have Yule, and Yule is December 21st to January 1st, so happy first day of Yule, which is basically the solstice, which marks the shortest day and the longest night of the year. And Yule celebrates the emergence of the sun and the days beginning to grow longer again. The festival was celebrated in Scandinavia, and um, that's where it was first celebrated anyway, as a Norse festival. A common tradition is the burning of the Yule log, which we still do today, often in association, and it's been folded into the Christian tradition, and it has been since the 9th century. Although there are a lot of people, and people I know, who stick to the tradition Yule celebrations as much as we know about them. Um, Not all those cultures had a lot of writing at the time, so some of that can be a little iffy to know exactly what happened, but it's definitely a big party time. And when you think about it, I mean, and actually, all of these religions I'm talking about seem to be, excuse me, as I um, try to get the phone quiet. Um, all of these traditions celebrate the sun. They celebrate light because the earth has been going through this dead period in the northern hemisphere, and light is starting to come back, or they're praying to the gods for light to come back, depending on how far back you go. Christmas Day, okay, that is the birth of Jesus, and different places mark it differently. Even some places that aren't Christian celebrate. some families that aren't Christian celebrate because there is a very positive side. It's a day of peace and love, and or that's what it's supposed to be, and sharing. And um, yeah, it gets interesting sometimes, but the that's the main focus of it. And then Protestant churches do it a little differently than Catholic and Orthodox churches, but there are masses. It's actually the liturgies in the Catholic and Orthodox churches are incredibly beautiful, very meaningful, um, very moving, whether or not you're a believer. And the day is also marked with a lot of the sun gods' birthdays. Now, there's a man that I follow on Instagram, Dan McClellan, and he's a PhD in um, biblical studies, scripture studies, and the critical the critical analysis aspect of it. And he points out that I think it was the second century, one of the theologians at the time determined Christmas Day to be Christ's birthday by using the tradition of when he would have been conceived on at Passover on Easter. Yeah. Um, how the connection? I don't know. I haven't heard what that is. Now, when I was studying more, mostly in history that went along and discussed these things more in depth, it was pretty clear that a lot of it had to do with putting the sun, which is as also the light. I mean, he's the son in the sense of being the son of a mother and father, and the father being God, and also the sun as in the light of the world, and connecting that with the birthdays of the sun gods, so many of them, which is where often by the time you really notice the days are getting a little bit longer, it's closer to the 25th. You don't notice that December 22nd. You notice it a couple days later, unless you have the monoliths in the calendars set up that show what day it is, like Stonehenge. But Stonehenge had been out of use for, geez, 1,500 years by then, as far as what its original purposes had been. So, and then Boxing Day goes back to Queen Victoria and the upper classes giving the servants a day off, staff the day off, giving presents, a day of appreciation and things like that. And it's a very commercial day of gift giving now. To my friends in British, uh, the British Isles, but also Australia and some other places, you know more about that than I do. Kwanzaa is a new holiday. It's December 26th through January 1st. And it's a cultural holiday, not a religious one. And Malana Karingan, I'm sorry, I clash over all these days. Created Kwanzaa in 1966 as a way to unite the African American community following the Watts rebellions, or race riots as they were said on television. I'm old enough, I remember those well. I didn't live down there, but saw everything going on. And an uprising against systematic racism began after white California highway patrolman arrested a man for drunk driving, and there were 34 deaths, 2/3 of which were individuals shot by police or National Guard troops, and over 1,000 injuries. And according to what um, I've been reading, and it lays out different principles: unity, self-determination, collective responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, and faith. And its name comes from the Swahili phrase, but Matunda Ikwanza, which translates to first fruits. Um, and it draws from African musical and storytelling traditions. And the next one we have is Zoroastrianism, which is December 26th. And it commemorates the death of Zoroaster. He was a prophet who created Zoroastrianism, and I'm not sure the exact dates of it. Well over 3,000 years ago. I think it was closer to 1500, 1600 BC. It predates the monotheistic concept in Judaism. In fact, the teaching of Zoroastrianism, including what happens after life, after death and the rest of it, was influential, it's thought, in the development of Judaism and then Christianity. And it's another light celebration. There's a fire, and it is still practiced to this day. It originated in Persia, and there are still areas in Persia that will celebrate it. I don't know that they can celebrate very openly these days, with the Ayatollahs running around. But and again, I don't mean to be I don't mean to disrespect people's beliefs, but there are groups in Los Angeles, and I think I read about one in Texas, and a few other in the States, I believe, that practice. And they have symposiums and bring in the scholars and theologians. And so it's still, though a small religion now, it's still very much an alive religion. And New Year's Day is met with anticipation around the world. There are parties, the fireworks, set resolutions and such, and the countdown to midnight on New Year's Eve to welcome the new beginnings. In many post-Soviet countries, the holiday is celebrated traditionally with traditions similar to Christmas, like the arrival of gifts from Grandfather Frost. And everybody here has different ways of doing it. It's for most of us, I think in the States, it's a secular a secular holiday. There are some faith traditions, including some Christian ones, that have special services and such that day. I know the Catholic Church does. And it's a time of hope and time of rebirth. And there are a whole lot of different superstitions that we could look up and go through, but that's a different program, not today's. And with that, these are 11 of the different holidays that I was able to find being celebrated this month. And I thank you all for watching. And I'll have this out on YouTube and Facebook and such for people to watch after the fact a little later. And I hope all of you have wonderful holidays no matter which ones you celebrate, or if you don't celebrate any, I hope the peace and love and joy of this season comes through to you and you get to experience that, um, especially in the times that we've been going through lately. So take care, everybody, and I'll be back the first Saturday of January 2025. Okay, bye bye.